Previously on the Girls Ask Guys show.
And I was like, why are you creating so much conflict for yourself? Like, this is ridiculous. But I couldn't stop her. And so I was just like, I'm not even going to bother trying.
Right.
Yeah.
But for me, I was just like,
I've dealt with that.
she would always say that she wanted a boyfriend and she wanted a long-term relationship. And, you know, she was like, I don't want to get married anytime soon. But she's like, but I want to get married by the time I'm like 30. So I would love to date someone for like 5 or 6 years. And I'm like, you never get even past the first date.
We now continue our conversation with Lauren, who can be reached on Instagram, Facebook, and Pinterest with the handle and Coffee Block. We complete the story with past relationships, and then Lauren tells her story of how she met her husband for the first time and the struggles they went through.
She was like, I don't want to get married anytime soon, but she's like, but I want to get married by the time I'm like 30. So I would love to date someone for like 5 or 6 years. And I'm like, you never get even past the first date.
Right.
And then it was just, I was so confused. Like, what you say you want this, but you're not setting yourself up for success.
Right.
Right.
And I think for her too, I think there was also some level of fear and like, she'd been hurt so many times and there was other things going on in her life.
So like,
and
she's been hurt so many times.
Well, and she was the one who was always dumping them. I think some of it was like a preemptive strike, but she also a lot of times would make fun of people. And I was just kind of her sense of humor. And I would, I just kind of got used to it. But not everyone likes that type of humor or accepts it. And so she would just push a lot of people away. And like I remember there's one gentleman who, he was like a food critic and he took her out to a 5-star restaurant on Valentine's Day for their first date and got her a 5-course meal. It's like a $500 meal.
Oh.
He had it paid for by his company because he'd been wanting to date her for years. And they dated for like a week and a half. And then he dumped her because she wouldn't stop making fun of his hairline on his head because it was slightly receding. And I was like, is that literally the only thing you don't like about him? And she's like, yeah, well, I don't want to date someone who's bald. And I was like, who cares? Like, you could have someone with a full head of hair and in a year they could be bald for multiple reasons. You could be bald for multiple reasons. That's not a good enough reason.
Jason Statham, man. That's a great example. Jason fucking Statham. And that's kind of tragic to see, like, especially when someone's going through those kinds of lengths to take you out. I mean, in my personal opinion, a $500 dinner is married. Like, we need to be married for a couple weeks. Like, you need to make some serious commitment.
At the very least, this is like, I want to date you for 3 years straight. Like at the very least, that's what that's telling me, And he was a really nice guy. I met him like one time in passing and I was like, oh my gosh, like he's so set up. He has a really good, stable, long-term job. He has all these awesome benefits with it.
Perfect.
He's younger. Like he's a really good person to like really try to date and took her like a week and a half. And I was just like, before he was like, I'm done. And part of it was like, she would overanalyze things too. And I was just like, you're overthinking it. Like, it's okay. If someone doesn't respond in a couple hours, it's because they're busy. Like, calm down.
Yeah. I can understand that she's been hurt in the past, but those guys are in the past. The guy that she's seeing now is her future.
Not them. Yeah.
Right,
and that's a big issue that a lot of us have. And I think that's a big issue. I mean, and that's not just in like relationships, that's like life. You get hurt by someone and then all of a sudden everybody else is the enemy. You know what I mean? Like, and anyone who reminds you that
my story, I think, is a great example of that. I can get into this just a little bit here. I know I kind of wrote to you guys, but so to recap, so I moved to Anaheim in like August of 2017. I transferred to the Starbucks. My transfer went late. And so I started at the Starbucks where I met my husband in October. And we met on the first day. It was really cute looking back now. So I walked in. I was really upset because I was dating a different guy. And we were kind of about to break up. I didn't know what was going on. And I was really upset. And I actually just left my second job. I had like quit it the day before because I was super emotional and exhausted. And the job just wasn't working out. And so I was freaking out because I was supposed to do all these things and I just lost a portion of my income. And then on top of it, there's this guy who's just, driving me crazy. So I walk in and my husband is in a store. He, is like, hi, welcome. And just kind of like smile at him. And I go to the back and I talk to the shift on duty. I get myself situated. And immediately he goes back to that same shift, who she's a great friend of ours named Haley. She was kind of his wing woman as we started dating. And he was like, oh, who's that new girl? She's like, oh, it's Lauren. She's like, oh, she's really cute. So he had a crush on me from the get-go and I was oblivious. And so then I kept chasing this other guy up until right around Christmas, before we broke up. Well, he dumped me like officially. I was kind of done with him by Christmas, but he like officially dumped me on New Year's Day. And that's how I started 2018.
What a gentleman.
He dumped me over the phone. He couldn't even say that he liked me, that we dated.
Oh my God.
It was great. I like got so mad, and I was like, so what were we like? Why did I waste my time with you for almost 6 months? Like, what was going on? And he was like, well, you're a really caring person. And I really like that about you. I was like, so you don't even like me? He's like, you're a caring person. And I was like, wow. And I went off on him.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, obviously. And so then, went back to work, and Miguel and he was a really great friend, and he was like, what? He was just like, this guy, like, you know, he went off about this guy and was just like, this guy's an asshole. I can't believe he'd do this to you. And I was like, well, you know, whatever. I was proud of myself for standing up to him, because I normally just kind of get walked over, but I was so proud of myself that I told him off, and I told him what he did was wrong. That ended up escalating things later, but I don't regret saying it because it allowed me to move on. And then Miguel had his birthday, and then Martin, he came back. A bunch of us had gotten in a habit of, after working, because we closed our store around 11:30, and then we would go to the In-N-Out across the street because they were open till 1, and we typically would like get burgers or something.
Yeah,
and
me too. I love In-N-Out.
Yeah, so we go to like the In-N-Out, and then we'd all go home. And so we're getting ready to do that one night, and then I don't remember how it happened, but Miguel and I ended up at, I had offered to everyone come back to my apartment because I had left over something or another from some sort of party or something. And I was like, oh, guys, just come back to the house I'm at, because I was renting a house. I was like, I have a ton of food, and I had a pool and a hot tub at my house somehow too. It was great. And I was like, just come over, like, let's just hang out. None of us worked the next day. Let's just hang out. And then everyone kind of knew that he had a crush on me, and like we were kind of flirting that day for like the first time. And so it ended up being just me and him. And then that was like the first night that he kissed me, and he immediately was like, I want to date you. I want this to be a thing. And that came out of left field for me. I was like, what
he probably had
happening?
The plan. Like, he was playing the long game, man. I love that.
Probably, honestly, which
it.
It worked out great. But literally I had been dumped almost 3 weeks to the day prior.
Oh.
And then he was like, I want to date you. And I being hurt, basically put my fingers in his face and was like, well, one, like, I want you to like have the same belief system as me, because like I go to church and stuff. And I was like, well, I want you to do the same thing as me. I want you to have, like, I want to have kids. You have to be okay having kids. You have to be okay with this. Like, I like listed like 5 things, like in his face. Like, it was super rude, but I think it was kind of from a place of foundation.
Yeah. You gotta be honest.
I mean, I'll be honest. So like, I said it rudely. Like, I totally will be honest, because I was still hurt. And so I was like, you know, da 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 da. And he looked at me with his gorgeous brown eyes, and he said, if you let me, I'll be that man for you. And
does he want to get married again? No, I'm just kidding.
I straight up was like, you're bullshitting. Like, I was like, no, he just like, no, like, sorry, mom, because I know you're probably going to listen to this, but I was like, he just wants to like, get in my pants. Like, no, this isn't real. I'd never get these guys. This doesn't happen. And I was like, are you serious? And he's like, why wouldn't I be serious? And I told him, I was like, because I never get this guy. Like, this never happens to me. He's like, no, I want you. And so, I don't know if he brought it up or I brought it up, but somehow the conversation of like a real date needed to happen. And so he stayed just a little bit longer. He actually worked a second job overnight. So basically he just hung out at my house until he had to leave to go to that job. So he hung out, I think around 11:30 is when he left, because then he went to his other job. His clock on time was like midnight. So he stayed till 11:30 and he left. And then the next day he was like, I don't work in the afternoon. And then I had a second job again at that point. And I was off at 6 and I didn't work at Starbucks. He's like, I'll come here. I'll pick you up at like 7 and we'll go to dinner. I was like, okay. So he came, he picked me up. We went to dinner. And in the drive over, he just kept staring at me. And I'd never seen anything like that before. And I was just kind of like, what?
Yeah, you're like,
and he was like, you're gorgeous. Your eyes are so pretty. Like, blah, 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 blah. And I hadn't felt pretty in so long, even though I projected that I did, because I bleached my hair to get pink dye out and it was falling out and I felt gross. My skin was like freaking out because I was constantly moving and my skin was becoming sensitive. And so I had these crazy acne flare-ups and like cystic acne, and like it hurt. So it didn't always look bad, but it hurt. And so I didn't feel good and all this other stuff. And so
and he saw past all of that.
He saw past all of it. And then I also just didn't physically feel great because of the breakup. I wasn't eating good. I was like eating out every night because I was just like, I don't want to cook. I don't want to do anything. I'm tired. Like, I hate this. And I was working probably way more than I needed to because I used to go to Disneyland a lot, and that's where my ex would go. And so I was trying to like avoid him, and people would always ask me to go there. So I'd always just like pick up shifts. I wouldn't have to like give excuses because I had friends who they were so sweet, but they would have like showed up at my house and be like, come with us to Disneyland. So I was always like just picking up shifts. So they would never, if they showed up, like they couldn't take me. And he saw through all of everything and was like, you're gorgeous. And so we went to dinner and it was so great and it was so smooth and it didn't feel like a date. It felt like we were just hanging out. And it was so nice dates. And refreshing. Yeah. And like, that's still how we feel to this day. And then we just kind of continued dating and I was really nervous and I like didn't tell my parents right away because they had known about this other guy and they didn't, we weren't super supportive of it and like rightfully so. And so I didn't really tell them about him right away, which was very abnormal for me because I'm normally a person like I always tell my parents everything. And something happened at work before I had gotten fired from this second job. I was working at an office and I had gotten fired from them very suddenly, abruptly, like at 11 a.m. on a Tuesday out of nowhere. Looking back, I talked to some people who also left or were fired from that job shortly thereafter. And we think there were some monetary issues and some other things going on. And I was just the first one. But something good happened at the job like a week or two before I got fired. And I immediately wanted to call Miguel. And I stopped myself after I dialed his phone number was ringing. And I just kind of had this moment of realization where I just was like, oh my God, he's the first person I want to call. Because up until that point, every time anything good happened, I always called my mom.
Yeah.
And she was always the first person I called. And I didn't even think about her. I literally was like, I need to call Miguel. I need to call Miguel. I need to call Miguel. And it was in that moment that I was like, he is so much more important to me than I even realized, which is slightly terrifying. But it was so just sudden a sudden realization of something just that felt so natural and right. And so that happened. And then right around then, my uncle passed away. And then I had his funeral and everything. And then literally a week later, like right around, it was the day of or day after his funeral, Miguel's grandfather passed away. And then shortly thereafter, I got fired from my job. And then he was dealing with he was getting ready to leave Starbucks because the manager we didn't fully trust and we felt like she was trying to fire him because there was just some weird stuff going on. And so he was already working to get himself out before it became sudden. And then right around then, my roommate, who I shared a room with, was just texted me out of the blue one day and was like, oh, I found another room. Like you need to pay the full $1,600 rent in 2 weeks.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
And I had just gotten fired like that same week.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Yeah.
That's nuts.
And Miguel and I had been dating for maybe a month at this point. And I was just freaking out and I was panicking. I honestly thought I was going to end up living in my car for a little bit. And like I was preparing to, I was like getting rid of stuff. Like I was like, I'm going to end up in my car for like a month and a half. Like I was just like totally ready. And Miguel was like, no, you can stay with me sometimes. And I was like, I know, but there's gonna be days where like, I can't. And cause he lived in Dana Point and like, I was just like, I'm going to end up like in my car and like, I can't tell my parents. And like, it was just all this different stuff. And like, I found a girl, Leah, who I now call my mom, quote unquote, even though she's like 5 years younger than me. But I found her to be an extra roommate. And so her and this other girl, we were like roommates and it was us three in one room and then 3 other people in another room in a 2-bedroom apartment. But we all worked so much that basically we at some point in the day, it was just go home, sleep, shower, go to work for all of us. It was just different hours of the day. They all worked for Disney. So we were right by the parks. And then I was working at Starbucks. And then that's what we did for a while. And then, Miguel and his parents wanted to move back to the desert and he had already left Starbucks at that point and gotten a second job and all this other stuff. And then him and I were deciding, do we stay in the Anaheim area? Do we go to the desert? And then in the midst of that, again, I got a movie situation where everyone in the apartment was like, oh, we're all leaving. And I wasn't on the lease. And so I had about 2 weeks to find another place to live. And so I found a little old lady named Martha who just wanted to rent a room out. and she was trying to rent it out for like $1,000 a month. And I was like, I can't afford that. And it was actually a garage. I was living in a garage with some carpet and stuff. Yeah. She was like, you know what? She's like, I can drop it down to 500 for you. She's like, I'd rather have someone who I can trust and care about and who will take care of my home and take care of my dog than like the money. And then she was really thankful for Miguel because he'd always come by and like, he'd check on things for her, like make sure things were fixed and whatnot. So I lived with her for like about 2 months before we moved to the desert. And that's not even touching on some of his family dynamics, some of the stuff that he had to deal with because it was his mom's father who passed away, and there was just lots of stuff going on with it. And then in the middle of like all that happening, Irvine had 3 flu outbreaks that ended up killing, I think, like 4 people.
Yeah.
And there were different strains of the flu. I caught 2 of the 3 strains. So in the middle of like losing my jobs and stuff, I'm like so sick I can't leave my bed. And then on top of all of that, my ex was not leaving me alone and started stalking me and harassing me. And it was this whole thing to the point where we ended up going to the police, and they were recommending I file like a restraining order and all this other stuff. And I wouldn't sleep in my own apartment. I would go to friends' places to like sleep because I didn't trust that he wouldn't show up. And so they were like, oh, we can add extra patrol and da 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 da. But I was like, the way the house is built, there's a lot of French doors. And so he easily could have just like come in, and the locks didn't work, and he knew that. So he knew how to get in if he wanted to. And so my big concern was like, I was like, if I call 911, it's still going to take them, 3 to 5 minutes to get there. And we're in the city of Orange, so it's a little bit smaller, and we're pretty close to the station. And so I was like, I have a good chance of anyone who's ending or starting a shift that they could get here really quickly. But in those 3 to 5 minutes, my ex is like 6'4" and several hundred pounds. I'm 5'3". He can do a lot of damage in a very short amount of time.
Yeah.
And so I didn't sleep in my home unless Miguel was there. And he like does crossbow, and he's a wrestler and all this other stuff. And he was like, I don't want you sleeping at this house unless I'm there. And so he never showed up as far as I know, but I had to tell all the other housemates I had to look out for his car and all this other stuff. And they kept an eye out. And there were a couple of times where they think they might have saw it, but they weren't for sure. But it was just all this stuff is, majority of that happened up until my having to move in with Lady Martha. All that happened in about 2 months.
Wow.
So yeah, it was a lot. Definitely don't recommend that in order to figure out if you should get married at all.
Thanks.
But I've always been told, there's like the quote unquote 7 tests you need to go through with someone before you marry them, like, or live with them, like whatever version they want. And it's always stuff like going through financial loss, or experiencing severe illness. Like you need to see them when they're sick. You need to see them, how they deal with money. You need to see how they deal with daily chores, and how they do grocery shopping. And then if there is a loss, like you should see how they handle it, just so you're aware of how they handle it, because people express grief differently, things like that. And some of them are funny and some of them are serious, but typically I've always heard like, oh, if you see someone go through something like this, like it's a good indicator of how they'll be with your life, and like da 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 da. And so I joke that we went through like all 7 of them in like 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And so that was like a huge thing of like, okay, if we can get through this, like there's literally nothing that we can't be able to get through. Because if we're able to come through that out so strong after barely dating for 60 days, we're only going to grow stronger and closer. So this is just going to become easier and easier, even as the trials become harder and harder.
Yeah, because we did have a question where somebody wrote in, and her mom was in the hospital, and she called the guy that she was going out with, and he didn't even bother texting back. Actually, he broke up with her. I was like,
what the fuck? I would beat the shit out of somebody.
Good riddance, first off.
Like,
good riddance. And like, I can understand that not everyone knows how to handle grief situations.
You don't break up with someone. You wait.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I can also understand like if he was already like there.
That was pretty much how I looked at it. He was probably already there, and he just was looking for an excuse. He just found a very poor excuse.
Yeah.
That's an awful excuse to
absolutely.
break up with someone.
Yeah.
But
Oh my
again,
God,
I would
you-
say like good riddance. Like,
Yeah, that's true. But
Well,
it'd
I
still
know
be
that
sad.
dealing with grief myself and having to do those type of calls and stuff. I mean, even the chaplains that come out there and they're the ones that break. Even they have problems dealing with it.
yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
grief is
Everyone
hard.
does. Absolutely. And everyone just handles it so differently. And you never know how you're going to respond, is the other thing.
Right.
That's what I've learned going through just various things. It's like you just don't know how you're going to respond.
It's never ending.
Because
Grief doesn't end.
no. And it's okay to not know how you're going to respond. The only thing it's not okay, in my opinion, is to not be sensitive to how other people are responding. Because, you know, some people cry and some people don't. I'm like naturally a crier, but every time I've had a really severe grief-based situation, I typically don't cry, which everyone's always very surprised. And I'm like, I can't even tell you why. I feel so overwhelmed that I can't move. So,
yeah.
But then I cry like Frozen. So it doesn't make sense, but it does.
Yeah. So what kind of traits did your husband actually demonstrate to you that really like drew you to him? Because I mean, going through all of this, I mean, I know he was providing like security, if not physical security, but emotional security to you.
Yeah. One thing that I realized I remember talking to my sister about is I'm not like a very serious person. I'm very deep, and when I'm very passionate about something, I can be very serious, but I naturally am not serious. Like my friends joke with me that I'm 5 years old. I love going to Disneyland. I will cry on Main Street. That's not even an exaggeration at all. I'm going in a few weeks. I guarantee I'm going to cry. Oh yeah.
I'm allergic to
Disney, but I love childlike things. I love childlike wonder. You know, it warms my heart. But my family, my parents are very serious people. And so I always felt like a black sheep because I didn't fit in with them. And my sister's relatively serious, but she can be fun outside of the house. My brother, who's in the military, is a very goofy person, but he just knows how to manipulate a room in order to getting relaxed or being serious. He's just really good at that. And the military honestly only enhanced that.
Yeah.
But he's not around all the time. So he's not that good icebreaker 100% of the time. And then my other brothers, they're also fairly goofy and silly, and they're okay like messing around, but they're very quiet. So I'm the one that struggles because everyone else in my family, all my siblings are quiet, but I'm not. And so I struggle at home because I want to talk and be goofy and silly and laugh, and it always ended up in a fight because everyone else wants to.
Been there.
Because everyone else wants to be quiet and serious, whatever, and I'm like, oh my god, that's so funny. I want to keep talking. Da 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 da. So with Miguel, I could be stupid and we could laugh together. Like we could laugh a Peter Griffin fart joke and it was fine. Like as simple as dumb as that sounds, like that's what it was. It was like
those simple things that make things so fun.
Right.
Yes. And it was, I mean, we were all sentimental, romantic in the beginning, and we still are. But I remember he would always say, like, you make me want to be a better person. He would bring me food when he knew that I worked really long days and I wouldn't have time to cook and prep food for myself. Like there was one day where I was texting him and I'd been up since like 5:30 in the morning and it was approaching 5:30 in the evening and I hadn't eaten anything all day for whatever reason. And so he brought me soup and a drink and all this different stuff. He dropped it off. He didn't even work at Starbucks with me that day because I had done a split shift and he didn't work, and he brought everything to me and just made sure I had it. And it's just like little things like that he just went really far out of his way. Yeah. But the biggest thing was honestly just being able to laugh with him naturally, like at my personal sense of humor. I didn't feel like I had to hide it. I didn't feel like I had to hide that part of me and not share that part of me. I could really be myself in a way that I'd never been able to be with anyone. And it wasn't anything like lustful or sexual or intimate. It was just straight up like we're at the dinner table eating like Chick-fil-A chicken nuggets or whatever it was. And we're just laughing at something stupid. I'm not even going to lie. We're very mature and we laugh at fart jokes all the time. And so like, that was probably one of them, but it was like being able to do that was so freeing. And I realized that this is what I had been missing, even in my family, like this type of relationship.
Just being able to be yourself. And just, I mean, he stole my line. but
and it sounds so cliche until like you actually experience it. And then you're like, whoa, I get it.
Yeah. And I mean, because that's one of the things that I constantly hear is that people always say, Well, they have to have a sense of humor. But if their sense of humor doesn't align with your sense of humor, then there's that clash.
Right.
But if
exactly.
if it
then it's
lines
pointless.
up,
Yep. Yeah. Because I have there's people at my work who they have a different sense of humor with me, and like we can totally joke around and have fun, but like it ends when we clock out because there's no desire to continue that conversation or continue that friendship or relationship or whatever. But with Miguel, it's like I crave it. Like when something happens at work, I'm like, damn it, where are you? I want to tell you about this.
Right.
Because he's gonna get it the way that I want him to get it.
Yeah.
You let people laugh. Be laughable.
Yeah, honestly. We always just watch really stupid comedy stuff. Like lately we've been really into Smosh. And so we've been watching a ton of that. He's the one who found it. We also have a really similar dark sense of humor, which most people are very surprised that I have. Because I'm such a happy-go-lucky light person, and then I make these really dark jokes, and they're like, "Where did that come from?" But my husband gets to see it all the time, so he knows like when something really dark happens, he'll look at me, and I'm like trying to hold back laughter because I don't like to like people. I don't know. It's like funny. Like if I laugh at something very dark in public with people who don't fully know me, they're very surprised, and it becomes like a 15-minute conversation that like I thought something so horrible was funny. So I don't try to do it in public, but who are around other people, because then they're always like. That just turns to this other thing, and I'm like, oh, I don't want to deal with that again. It's annoying.
Yeah.
But he knows, he'll see it in my face and stuff like that. And every once in a while, there'll be something that he didn't find funny that I found funny. He's like, wow, you're like evil. But you know, it's just one of those things where he tells me all the time that he gets to be himself around me too. And I started noticing that when, for me, he's a talker. We never stopped talking. Half the time when we first started dating, I didn't get a word in edgewise because all he did was talk. And I was like, wow, I met my match.
Yeah, that's me.
And then we went and hung out with his parents, and they're like, oh, he's our quiet boy, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
You don't know your kid. Funny. And then I realized he doesn't talk around his family at all. Like he told me, he's like, I would go like days without speaking a word to anyone because I didn't need to. So I just didn't talk to them. And I'm like, what the heck? No wonder they don't know who you are. You don't talk to them. Which is funny because he's just naturally quiet with like a lot of people. He's very quiet. And for me, I'm always like, no, he's not. But then I realize it's because with me, he's so comfortable that he's able to do and say whatever he wants, which is something that I also hear a lot is, everyone likes to do like the old, if you're a talker, he needs to not be, or if you're a talker, she needs to not be, and like, whatever, blah, 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 blah. And I had always said for years, like, I don't care if they're shy and quiet with other people. I just need them to be able to hold a conversation with me, because if I go home and they don't speak with me because they're so introverted, that's an issue. Mm-hmm. And because there's some people who are like that. They just don't need to have all the conversation, even as a couple. And Miguel is just such a perfect example of like, we'll be out with people, and unless he really enjoys their company, he doesn't talk because he sees no value in it. Mm-hmm. But whereas me, I'm like, I'll talk to anyone and everyone all day long. I don't care.
Yeah.
But for him, it's so different. Until he values a person, he sees no reason to share his words. Which I just admire that about him, because I'm like, I can't shut up. But with me, it's so different, because we come home and he's able just to converse, and we tell stories and we laugh. And he used to work in different customer service jobs, and he has some of the craziest stories of some of his jobs that he did and stuff. And so we just share all about that. But the big thing is he would always say, like, I'm able to be myself around you. Like, I'm able to laugh at things that I can't laugh at with other people. I'm able to, just because a lot of it, honestly, just really immature humor that we both just laugh at. But we're able to do it without feeling judged. We can be vulnerable in that regard and stuff like that. And we're just very comfortable around each other because there's just no reason not to be.
And this is where we are going to wrap this episode of our conversation with Lauren. You can reach out to Lauren on Instagram, Facebook, and Pinterest by searching each of those sites for And Coffee Blog. And Coffee Blog is spelled as one word. A-N-D as in David. C-O-F-F-E-E. B as in Baker. L-O-G as in George. Links can be found in the show notes and at the girlsaskguyshow.com website under this episode. In the next part, Lauren shares what made her decision easier to marry Miguel, how the Enneagram helped, and the type of communication that works for their marriage. Be sure to subscribe so you are automatically notified when that episode becomes available. We appreciate everybody for listening, and we will talk to you on the next one.